Hello everyone, in today's video we're doing a product review of the company OHUHU. They have gifted me some fine liners in all various sizes, some grey markers, 36 in total, and their very own sketchbook. I'm going to review these using this checklist I created. We're going to mark out what is good, what is bad. I'm going to start with the sketchbook, the markers, and then the fine liners. So once I've completed the product review, we'll make a drawing together. This time I'm going to do a voiceover and I'll tell you step by step what I'm doing, which pen I'm using, why I'm doing it. It's going to be beginner friendly. So let's get started. So first up we have the sketchbook. This is the 8.5 inch by 6 inch mixed media pad. I think that's telling us that we can use it for ink drawing and potentially watercolor too. I don't do any watercoloring. So let's have a look at this. What's important here is the paper grade. It's 200 grams per meter squared. That's quite thick. So what that's good for is avoiding bleed. So with alcohol markers, you can bleed through the paper and it can go through to the other side, which is kind of ugly on the other side, but I don't really care about that. But what I do care about is it bleeding onto the page below. And we'll talk about that later, because when you buy the markers, they provide you something to help avoid that, so we can have a look at that later. Here we have the instructions about the paper. It talks about how to avoid the bleed in the material that we can put between the pages, and also I think it's telling us how to remove the page. In the sketchbook I'm using just now, I cannot remove my page very easily. I don't really want to, but with this sketchbook you can remove it if you want to, and that makes it easier to photocopy or to frame or something like that, or gift to someone or send somebody it in the mail. Okay, let's have a look at the sketchbook. Okay, so here's the sketchbook. I'm just going to do a size comparison with the one that you guys are familiar with. This is the Sakura sketchbook I'm using. They're approximately the same size. The paper is a slightly different colour. The one I use is slightly yellow, and this one is basically pure white. So it's a wire-bound sketchbook, which personally I do not like. I prefer the one like I have just now, but it's all personal preference. Let's have a look. So as soon as we open, we have this very flat, which I think is a good thing. It's a very flat piece of plastic which you can put between the page to avoid bleeding. Now, the plastic you get with the markers, in the packaging, it's kind of like this. So it's kind of bumpy when you put it between the page. It's too bumpy to really work with, but this is really perfect because it's flat, and that's what we need. So 10 out of 10 for that. So let's have a look at the paper. So the paper is really thick. It's much thicker than the one I have. I think the one I have is 120 grams per meter squared. So I can't really imagine there being any bleeding through that, but we'll see. Okay, so, and you also get quite a lot of pages. I think you get, how many pages do we get here now? 62 pages. So you get less pages, but they're very thick. So one thing that's very noticeable is the paper's very smooth, which is good because if you use very sensitive fine liners like we do, they can actually wear down very fast on very rough paper. So this is perfect for fine liners like we have. The general aesthetic of the sketchbook I don't like. I prefer the kind of leather bound where it's you're building a piece of treasure that you can keep forever. This one is very versatile because you can remove the paper and you can also photocopy very easily. So I think that's good. Okay, so let's give this a real stress test with our alcohol marker, a really dark one. Let's see if we can get it to bleed. So applying the ink really thick. There is no plastic sheet between the page. And let's see if it bleeds. So no bleeding, and you can also see on the opposing side, which I never use, there's very little bleeding even there. You can almost hardly see it. So in my opinion, You really don't need the plastic, but I think it could be a good idea to use it anyway. I think what I'll do is I'll use this in my Sakura sketchbook, because it's perfect, because Sakura do not provide that. So it's a big thumbs up to OHUHU for that. So let's talk about price. The OHUHU retails for approximately €16, which is approximately the same as $16. Though that's, I don't know if you can buy it cheaper in America. I do not know. I know they do have distribution centers in America, so you guys will have to check. Perhaps it's cheaper. I imagine it probably is. The Sakura, which I use, is approximately €9, which comes to approximately $9. Maybe that is also cheaper. I am surprised about the price. I thought that OHUHU would be cheaper than the Sakura, but I suppose the paper is much thicker. Perhaps it's because of that. Okay, so let's have a look at the sketchbook. So for price, I'm not really sure what to do here, so I'm going to leave it neutral. It may be cheaper in the United States, and I'm not really comparing the same thickness of paper to the Sakura, so I'm not really sure what to do there. Okay, so for the bleed, it's absolutely good for me. For the texture, it's a little bit rougher than the Sakura, which I'm not really sure about, but I think it's not too rough that's going to ruin your pen. I guess you would have to see after time. So I'm going to mark it good. Photocopying, yes, it's good. It's better than the Sakura, so that's good. Aesthetic, I don't like the way it looks. Some people might not care about that, but I don't like it, so that is a bad. In fact, I would never use that type of sketchbook because of that. I know OHUHU do provide or sell ones similar to Sakura, but they provided me the wire-bound one this time. So for me, that particular one is bad. Page removal is good. That's a feature which is not available on the Sakura. Okay, so we're going to look at the markers next. So these are the markers that OHUHU provides us. They're called the Honolulu series. Now, there's two different types of markers. There's one where you have a brush tip and a fine tip, but this one is called a broad tip. Now, I actually don't use that type of tip. I'll show you the one I use. I use the brush tip. Now, you can, when you're ordering your pens, you can tell them which one you want. I recommend this one. This one doesn't really have much detail or possibility for detail. I don't like this type. So one side is the broad tip, and one side is the larger brush tip, and then the other option, which I like, is the brush tip with the fine tip. There's 36 inside. This is the plastic sheet I told you about. Now you can see there that it's bent, and it's not really useful to put between your pages in this state. But I guess it's difficult for them to overcome that when they're deciding on their packaging strategy. They provide you a colour sort of key. So what you need to do here is you need to colour in each box with your pen. That's very useful. I highly recommend that you do that. And you also have just sort of general instructions and what other pens are available, I'd imagine. The tips are replaceable. That's a big bonus. And they are also refillable, but not all. If you go onto their website, the majority are refillable, which is one of the reasons I actually moved to OHUHU. So let's have a look at the price. So these are currently, this grey set is currently retailing for approximately $35. If you want to have the same thing in Pro Markers or Copic, it's going to cost you at least 3 or 4 times more, and for the Copic, I think we're talking about 10 times more. So the price is a huge bonus, and it's also one of the reasons I moved to OHUHU. Now let's have a look at the ergonomics of the, what's important to me is the tips. So this particular tip I do not like, but I love the fact they gave the brush option, which I love. I love the fact that the cap comes off easily and it connects to the top. I love that. This is something I don't leave it to the side. I like connecting it to the top. The ergonomics for me is good. The bleed, we already stress tested it with the darkest one we had in the packet and it had no effect. So that is a good. But you will be aware you will get some bleed with alcohol markers. It's normal. This is normal. Now, color matching for the tops. So this particular one is the GG020. If you look here, this is this one here. It doesn't really match. Now that's not really important to me, but it might be important to some people. Okay, so these almost never really match. I guess it must be very hard to produce a plastic that matches the color. So that is a bad for me. The packaging and presentation I think is fine. So the packaging and presentation I think is fine. You know, you can keep them like I don't actually keep it like that. I'll show you what I do. So you have warm greys, cool greys, you have neutral greys, blue, green, yellow, etc. I don't like mixing a green with a yellow. So for example, what I do is I have an elastic band and I keep my blues together and I keep my yellows together and I just paint with the yellows or draw with the yellows. So the packaging presentation I think is fine. The only problem is the plastic that you're supposed to put between the page is getting damaged, but I think overall I think it's good. The sizes and versatility I think is good. I love the fact that you can choose the type of tips you have. I love the fact that you can change the tip and refill. Refilling is a separate item, but so this is good. The ink quality is good. I think you guys have saw in the videos recently I've been using these, and I like the way it distributes, the ink distributes evenly into the paper. So the ink quality for me is fine. One thing I didn't mention, I'll do it now, is with most alcohol markers you have a mixer pen. Okay, it's a 0, and you can use this to blend. You can use it to blend the inks. I never use that. So the pens are also refillable. I think that's a big bonus. Storage. On the website, you will see that OHUHU sell some sort of bamboo wooden little shells for your pens. So you can do it, it makes them look really nice. You can do that. You can store your pens like that if you want to. So I think that's good that that's available. I checked and the markers are non-toxic or hazardous. It conforms to this standard, so that's also a big bonus. The color range is massive. I mean, it's not just these greys. I think there's 320 different colors. So it has every color that you ever need. Now, there's only one problem with the colors that I see, is the naming convention is really bizarre. So the naming convention is very strange. It doesn't seem to flow in a very logical manner, but it's not a big deal. But I think you will also notice this, especially when you fill this out. This is when you notice that the naming convention is a little bit strange. It doesn't seem logical. So the color range and naming is good. So next up is the Fineliners. So here are the Fineliners. There are 8 in total. We have a brush size, 0.05, my favorite, 0.1, a 0.2, 0.3, 0.5, 0.7, and a 1.0. Okay, what do we have here? Okay, so we have some instructions here. What's really important is these are water-based. That means if you use it with an alcohol marker, color marker, it will not smudge as much. Try to avoid using a water-based fine liner and a water-based color marker. You'll get all sorts of smudging. It's not recommended. Try and use opposites. So this is perfect with the alcohol marker. So what I find strange with this is this part here. It kind of looks a bit cheap. It doesn't really look the same as the Sakura. It doesn't have the same feel to it. It doesn't have the same professional feel to it. And the brush, for example, is not very sharp. It's not long and sharp like the Sakura brush. This is the 0.7. The shape and the sort of form of the pen is a little bit strange to me. I'm not used to it. I don't think it's a big deal. I like the fact the cap goes onto the end, and also the caps have the size. So where's my favorite one? The 0.05. Let's have a look at that. So this is the one I use most. No, I have not used this one yet. So let's have a look with the paper. So it feels good to use. The ink is coming out in a nice smooth way. No problem really. I don't see any difference really in its performance with other fineliners. Let's go back to the checklist we have here. Now I want to talk about price first. So these OHUHU fineliners come in at $13 approximately. And that's for 8. You get 8 for 13. The Sakura, for example, is approximately the same, but you only get 6. Okay, so the price is technically a little bit cheaper than the Sakura, but I personally find the Sakura to feel a little bit more professional. I'm going to draw with these pens in the next few videos so I can really become accustomed to it. But for me, the price is okay. At least it's cheaper, at least. So let's give that a good. Ergonomics, I haven't seen any problem. It feels a little bit weird, the form here, but the general form and ergonomics is fine for me. So the caps is good. I like to have the cap attached at the top. If it did not do that, I would never use it. And the size, they have all the sizes I like, and it seems good to me. The packaging and presentation is fine. It's not really something that's important to me, but I think it's good. The tip sizes and versatility, yes, it's good. You have all the sizes you need, and we'll use it later, and then we'll really see. But initial instinct is that is okay. Smudging, let's do the smudge test now. Right, for the smudge test, I'm going to do this in 2 different ways. I'm going to add the alcohol marker like this in a very thick way. It's kind of wet. And I'm also going to do a grid like this with the Fineliner. And now I'm going to add the lines on top when it's still a little wet. And you can see that it does bleed a little bit into it. Now it's still wet, so it's a very challenging test to pass the marker ink directly on top. And let's see what happens. So that, I think, is acceptable to me. It's very similar performance to Sakura. This time, let's give the marker a chance to dry. And let's give the Fineliner a real good chance to dry, like 1 or 2 minutes. This is now dry, and let's have a look. So there's 0 bleeding there, so it's perfect. I would be very surprised if that was doing some bleeding. And let's add the alcohol marker. Let's really stress test it, okay? So you can really colour. There's a tiny bit of bleeding, but I think that would be expected when I'm doing something so extreme like that. But for me, it's totally acceptable. So for the smudging, for me, it's in perfectly normal range and acceptable. So next up, we're going to do a drawing using these new pens in Sketchbook. Okay, so I hope that video wasn't too long-winded. We're going to do the drawing now. I'm going to use the blues, and I'm going to start with the lightest one. So the lightest blue is MG020. I'm going to use the longer brush tip, and I'm going to start by just focusing on the general shapes, so large shapes to start with. Now I like to keep it really loose at this point. Try not to think too much. Just focusing on the general shape. To add a doorway here. I like to really dance the pen across the page. Don't press too hard, keep it nice and loose. Add some features like windows and doors. And because we're starting with the lighter pen, if we make some mistakes, it's not as bad. So next I'm going to start adding a little bit more shapes, but with a darker colour. And I'm going to use the BG203. And remember what I said about the strange naming convention of the markers? So let's try and get some more shapes. Try not to keep it similar all the way. Just looking for little shapes. I think the light is going to come in from this side. Okay, I'm going to go back to the MG020 and really sort of define the shape now. So I'm really decided what I want to do now. I want the light to come in here. There's going to be some shadow under these parts. And still keeping it loose. So this is where the shadow side is. I've got some shadow here. I've got some shadow coming down here like this. All the way down here. Perhaps there's some shadow there. Certainly in the doorways. All of that door. Maybe get a shadow here. And some of that shadow is also being cast onto that side. Now I think I'm ready for the Fineliner. So this is my start point for the Fineliner. It's not a complete picture, but this is where I start from, and then I add the details now. So it's very simple. I'm using the 0.05, the thinnest marker, and I'm going to go around and start drawing in what I think I've just created. So after finishing up with the 0.05, what you can do is take something like the 0.2 and then go around the real dark edges. I'm going to take the really dark marker. It is the BG209, and I'm going to add in the darkest shadows. Got to be really careful here. really subtle. So this door, for example, is very dark. I'm going to make this completely black. There's no light getting here. So that concludes today's video. I'm very happy with the OHUHU materials. No major problems at all. I'm especially happy with the markers. I will continue to use those. The Fineliners, I'm still not sure if I'll use that over the Sakura. I'll give them another 1 or 2 videos try, and then we'll see. Hopefully you followed my process. It's very, very simple. I showed you every step. If you want to see from these types of things from start to finish, I have more content which shows you everything without any cutaways. And if you have any questions, message me on the chat. Okay, see you next time. Bye-bye.